I'm Shemaya. It's like papaya, except it's not. And this is Plot Twist Please. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to the podcast. It is debatable whether or not this episode will be on the streaming platforms right away, but it is definitely going to be on YouTube sooner rather than later. I just wanted to chat with y'all about empathy and how empathy can be your strength. I am someone who is autistic, as you very well know if you've listened to this podcast for a while, if you've been following the shenanigans of Plot Twist Please for a while. And one stereotype out there about autism is that when you are autistic, you lack empathy or you struggle to empathize, when that for some people can be the case, but that in my case couldn't be further from the truth. I am someone who tends to over empathize. I'm not going to call myself an empath because I do have, an issue sometimes with how people describe themselves in that way and what that can actually mean. Just how people go about that phrase and how it can be kind of trivialized. But I have always been someone who is very quick to empathize, almost to a fault. And a lot of autistic people actually go through this, and a lot of neurodivergent people go through this, where there is hardly a boundary between how much they are willing to offer to someone else in a social setting or in a relationship of themselves, and how much they hold sacred for themselves. And part of that has to do with not knowing what the social norms are, not knowing what is expected in relationships. And that can make relationships really difficult and can lend itself to toxic situations where we allow ourselves to be used or, in extreme cases, abused. And I don't want to allude to any kind of idea that being abused is a victim's fault or anything of that nature. I'm not victim blaming here. I'm saying that as an autistic person, I am more prone to be a victim of abuse because of the patterns that I have been socialized into, and as someone who uses patterns to survive in social settings and in relationships and pretty much lives by the codes that have been set before me. I am going through the process now, the very strenuous, difficult process of deconstructing the things that I actually want and feel comfortable with versus the things that I have been told that I should be comfortable with or that I should want. And that is a long process. It can be a long process, and it can be extremely difficult to sift through the things that are what you've been socialized into versus the things that you actually like. And I figure that for anyone who is coming to terms with their place in particularly a racial, gendered, or neurotypical or non-disabled hierarchy, anyone who's coming to terms with their position within that matrix, I'd imagine would be going through a long, intricate process. And I do think that it is absolutely okay to take your time with that and to allow yourself grace with unraveling those things and those concepts and how they manifest in your life on a daily basis. Because it is work that is almost never done, and I like to think of it as work that is never done because it also that mindset lends itself to you cutting yourself some slack and giving yourself an opportunity to grow without shaming yourself into that growth. Because shame doesn't actually help us grow. It doesn't actually help us. If you try to shame a child into not doing something, most of the time that child is only going to gain resentment toward themselves when they do said thing, rather than understanding why this thing can be harmful or where their growing up was coming from when they were instructing them not to do it. This comes into play a lot of the time when we talk about many versions of ABA therapy. If you're not familiar, ABA therapy is something that a lot of autistic children go through. You could classify it as special education, but a lot of the time, this kind of therapy is actually abusive and creates a lot of trauma that that child has to later heal from. And then they have to develop a sense of self strong enough to know that they are not inherently bad and the things that they've been instructed to not do are not inherently bad, but that they live in a society that punishes people who are different and punishes people who have needs that are different than the average person, and that that is not their fault and that is nothing that should make them ashamed. And I'm saying all that to point out that growth is a gradual thing. It is not a turn on a dime. It is not a Build-A-Bear situation or a quick fix. And it can be extremely painful, but most things that are worthwhile are a little painful. And it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. If you find yourself questioning those very concrete things that you thought were concrete about yourself, that doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It means that you're doing absolutely everything right. You are challenging yourself in ways that most people wouldn't dare to, in ways that most people wouldn't be brave enough to, and that's an admirable thing. In order to have the discussion about empathy, I would love to relay a simple anecdote. As I've previously stated, I'm someone who has always had an affinity toward empathizing with someone almost to a fault. And though having an enormous amount of empathy and having that capability can feel like a curse, and it can feel like something that people only take advantage of, and that especially if you're a woman, and especially if you consider yourself to be a feminine woman, it can feel like something that is holding you back, either in your career, in your relationships, especially if you've been hurt, especially if you've been traumatized by situations. Someone took advantage of your affinity toward empathy, which can be extremely difficult. And I've experienced that firsthand several times, where it has felt like my empathy or my ability to empathize was more of a curse. But I'm here to tell you that it's not. That there's so much strength and power in your ability to empathize, and that so many people wish they had what you had, and so many people need what you have. So I'm going to do what I said I was going to do a few seconds ago and offer an anecdote. So when I was fairly young, about 9 or 10 years old, I had the kind of empathy that would often cause me to abandon myself. And I later had to deconstruct that and reshape that and refocus that energy into something that was more self-affirming, that honored my needs as well as the needs of the people around me in a more balanced way. But before I got to that point, I always wanted to make the people around me happy. And whenever someone around me was unhappy, I immediately blamed myself. And though this was a negative aspect of it, I remember a very distinct moment. I think it was, I was at a camp, like at a church camp, and we were going on a group trip to a ropes course. And everyone was so excited on the bus. Everyone was chatting about how fast they were going to go through the rope course and how exciting it was going to be to go to their first rope course. And of course, I had never been through a rope course before, and I was really excited too. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how high it was going to be. I didn't know how difficult it was going to be. But so we arrived. The bus pulled up at this site, and it was in the rural suburbs, the more rural part of the Illinois suburbs. And I remember pulling up on the bus, getting out the bus, everyone filing out the bus, and then us all collectively walking up to the ropes course. And it was this grand, intricate maze, and it was way up high in the air. I don't have very good measurement proximity as it pertains to feet or anything like that, but it had to have been at least as tall as the average size suburban home. That was the shortest part of the rope course. I'm looking up a video right now to kind of paint the picture in my mind, and yeah, it was about the height of a roof of an average size suburban home, and the course was so big. It was so grand. And I remember looking at the people around me like, y'all gonna say something? Like, are y'all still excited? Because I'm a little nervous. I'm a little scared. Just a little scared. Just a little bit. And everyone was mirroring the sentiments that I was thinking internally, because I didn't speak very much. That's another thing. I didn't speak very much when I was young to anybody. It's not that I never uttered words. It's not that I was mute. I do think that I had some form of selective mutism, though. I didn't speak very much. And so inside my head, it was like, okay, this is kind of nerve-wracking. Is anyone want to go first? Because it's not going to be me. Of course, I didn't say it out loud, but I was like shaking in my boots. And everyone looked terrified. Like, you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone looked up at that rope course and said, who in the world do you think is gonna take their measly bones up there onto that rope course? And you could feel it. Everybody was so nervous. And here's the thing. In hindsight, it's like nothing was going to happen to us. There was a harness. There were professionals there. They were holding us up the entire time, and we were all little kids. I think we were all like 10-year-olds, and these were grown men who were going to be holding us from the other end, and we had on harnesses, like we were going to be fine. But here we were, shaking in our boots, sweating bullets, and who knows what, just aghast at this sight. And then I remember thinking to myself, our group leaders are going to be so disappointed if none of us go on this rope course. If they paid all this money to take us to this site and took us on this bus through the cornfields, all right, through rural suburbia, and for several hours, mind you, this was like a 2-hour trip to this site to do this really cool thing that they were really excited about, and then none of us decided to do it. How disappointing would that be for none of us to do it? And so I thought to myself, okay, I have to make a choice, and my choice is to make the group leaders happy. So, being the pushover, people pleaser, what have you, that I was determined to finish the rope course, or at least start it, because nobody else was going to do it. So, I had them harness me up. After they said, who wants to go? I was like, I'll go. Everyone was looking at me like I was crazy. And they harnessed me up. They, did the doohickey. They did the do. And I was on my way. I was on my way up the rope course. So, they pulled me up, all the way to the top. And I remembered thinking, okay, just do not look down. Just look straight in front of you. Just look straight ahead of you. They don't exist down there. The ground doesn't exist. It's just this rope course, and pretend like this rope course is on solid ground. And so I did it. I went through that rope course, and oh my gosh, it was so hard. It was one of those rope courses that required upper body strength after a while. I was up there for maybe 20 minutes going through that course. Yeah, my muscles were shaking. And there was a point too where I looked down and my heart was beating so fast. It was just and I was like, oh my God, I can't get off this course. I have to finish it. I can't just stop. I have to keep going. And then I kept going, and there was a part of the course where I had to walk across this this kind of tightrope situation, and I'd put one foot in front of the other, and I was like, I gotta keep going. I gotta keep going, because if I don't get across this rope course, then it'll all be for naught, and then our group leaders will be so sad that we wasted our time here, and I can't let them think that they've wasted their time. And so then I kept going. And then there was a part where I had to do this kind of monkey bar situation. Did not have a lot of upper body strength, but did have a lot of will. And so I made it across, and my arms were shaking, my muscles were crying. And then at one point, my foot slipped and I fell off. And they, of course, caught me with the harness. But y'all, that way down was one of the most terrifying and exhilarating moments of my life, and I will never forget it. And the reason why I will never forget it is because I realized that my empathy made me do things that the average person was too afraid to do. And I don't think I tapped into that entirely and really let that sit with me, really let that rest with my spirit. But looking back at it now, and I'm almost 25 years old. I turn 25 tomorrow. But looking back at that experience, I just can't help but think of how much it took for me to get on that obstacle course, and then how much determination it took for me to try and get through it. And I remember being up there and the people below cheering me on and telling me I could do it, and just being on my team. It was so worth it to take that risk. And that's the thing about empathy, is that a lot of the time it will cause you to do things that are foolish, but it will also cause you to do things that you need to do and that you wouldn't do without that empathy present, where the only thing that is going to give you the courage to do it is your empathy. I can recall another situation where I was really deeply hurt by a friend, and instead of lashing out at them, I tried to understand them. I tried to understand their point of view, and I tried to put myself in their shoes. And that's something that empathy will do as well, is it will cause you to do the hard thing, not take the easy way out, which is to center yourself in everything and to make everything about your experience. When a lot of the time, or rather all of the time, the situation that you were going through or the things that you were experiencing are not just happening to you, and there are multiple perspectives to take into account. And so that's something that empathy will do, is it will force you to look outside of yourself, even if for an instant, and it will force you to see another human as if they are you. And though it is there are points of view that say that it's virtually impossible to empathize fully with someone. I don't know about that, but what I do know is that when you allow yourself to be brave enough to empathize, and especially if you have that naturally, if you have that instinct, that inclination, then you allow the world to be a smaller place, and you allow room for understanding and for humanness, even in times of crisis. And empathy becomes a muscle that you always have at the ready, and it becomes something that is your strength. And once you have harnessed it in a way that is balanced, and in a way that takes into account your basic needs and your desires for your life, then that is when you become unstoppable. Because here's the thing too, self-preservation without empathy is violent, is parasitic, is overpowering a lot of the time. But empathy without self-preservation is anemic. This is a shorter episode for today, but I just wanted to leave that with you. And thank you for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe and have a great day. Stay weird, y'all. Bye.